Rick, my best friend in banking. How are you today?
Good, good, good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good as well. I'm still recovering from the art night. It was
Is it?
such a great event. Oh, I really, really liked it. It was such a long time ago, at least for me, to really meet people physically.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was really nice.
I
And
can
the fact that
imagine,
we
yeah.
can do that in a COVID safe situation, appreciate it.
Yeah, 110 people finally together again.
Yeah, yeah.
Talking
You
about the art of banking.
talking about the art of banking and talking about the art of banking also in your article, which I like to thank you for that, for your contribution. You also talk about the art of banking, but you even bring some additional element to that, which is the black magic. What do you mean? What's behind this black magic and art?
Black magic, in the context of regulatory issues, and that's what we talk about in context of the RegTechBlackbook, of course. That is to me all the magic that often banks cannot explain in terms of
Mhm.
managing all the different risks they encounter. So when I spoke about turning black magic into fine art, I was referring to the fact that today very often banks can refuse clients, often cannot explain why they refuse clients, and are not always um, acting in for the good of their customers. And I think that's something that needs to change, and that's what I would like to refer to as fine art. The idea that
Mhm.
banking can become something that people resonate with, and it's a very tough thing to do because a lot of people are ignorant about banking, about financial services.
Mhm.
Even though in the many conversations I had with executives, and also my personal point of view is that you can say banking is about risk management, very relevant in the case of the RegTech Black Book, of course. But banking is also about realizing dreams
I 100% agree.
and ensuring that a society can thrive. And if we can do that as a financial services in a much better way than what we used to do in the past, to me, we're turning black magic, the whole issues of the financial crisis, bad governance, etc. We're turning that into fine art in favor of human and society.
That's a nice one. So it's really bringing the user experience back in front and really, I once had a guy who told me when I was younger, and he said, "Well, did you know that at the bank you can buy time?" And I said, and I was like, "What do you mean?" Yeah, you can actually get a loan for a house, but you buy time because you get the house already today and you only pay in a period of 20-25 years. So what you're selling is time. And that's where I realized, yes, it's all about dreams. It's all about making it better. And that's also for me was the moment that I thought, yeah, banking is something very fundamental to a society.
But it also means that we have to lift the conversation from a user experience thing, which
Mm-hmm.
we have been discussing a lot. I think like until like 10 to 5 years ago, user experience was the anchor point of digital banking. Then came the customer experience, which looks a bit broader already. And I think
Yeah,
now we really need to look at human experience, which goes far beyond that. And that's about realizing dreams, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So in realizing those dreams, that beyond that, how do you see then the role of the regulator towards a bank? Is that an enabler, a must do, or is it something in between?
I think it's both, and they don't contradict. Being an enabler and being, well, the bad guy for banks, I think you can have both roles at the same time, because by forcing banks to act in favor of human and society, which is what a regulator essentially does,
Mm-hmm.
promoting innovation to ensure that customers have the best experience, have the best price, have the best everything possible, given the circumstances, that enables um, a lot more different shifts, and they can be very painful for the industry on the short term. But
Yeah.
in the longer term, I think that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I think, for example, open banking has been a good example of that, right? PSD2 in Europe.
Oh, yeah, and that's over the past 5 years or 5 to 10 years. But look at what's coming next with the Glasgow meetings that are currently going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's gonna be a much more fundamental shift than what we've experienced in terms of banking over the last 10 years. And that's a shift that is no longer purely about technology, but really about the essence of our
Humanity.
planet.
Yeah. Humanity as a
And,
whole.
and, and that's what I like so much today about RegTech. Until
Hmm.
recently, RegTech was almost synonymous for AML, for KYC, at least in the banking sector. And what we're going to see now is this shift to ensuring or enabling banks to be in line with new regulation in favor of a greener future and beyond that. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's, I
yeah.
think, a very interesting trend to follow up in terms of RegTech.
Yeah, now you also gave an example, right? When you talk about ESG and some providers that use technology to bring a better scoring, for example, to
Yeah.
bring neutrality object to be objective in what's happening in the market.
And beyond that, I read an article today about banks that are partnering together, and I forgot the name of the initiative, but essentially they agree that they will do more efforts in ensuring that their customers are no longer supported with tools that can help them becoming greener or more carbon neutral, but really pushing them to do so. And that is, I think, a very important shift and something that we'll see a lot more in the near future where RegTech can play an
Mm.
incredibly important role
Yeah,
because
and
banks cannot do that alone.
no, and definitely driven also by regulation and by ambition. I think
Driven
that
by
also has changed.
regulation,
Yeah.
ambition, and also not knowing enough about which data to use. And that's where another element that you probably like to discuss, the element of collaboration. And that becomes a cross industry collaborative effort.
Yeah.
The moment that banks need to push their customers towards a greener future, that also means that they need to start understanding how these industries work, meaning that banking
Mhm.
becomes even more complex than it is today, and meaning that they need even more support than they do today from external parties.
Would you consider that this then the whole trend around beyond banking? Is that what it is?
It's a good interpretation of what beyond banking could be. Um, my understanding is that beyond banking very often is still about customer experience. Um, but if you make abstraction of beyond and banking, of course it can go into any direction. So in a way, yes, it is about beyond banking.
Yeah,
Like
that's
open banking could be about providing or using external data to create more and better products. And that's a parallel I made in 2000. I think it was in 2018 when we invited State Street to talk about open banking. They didn't have anything to do with PSD2 and had a completely different interpretation of what open banking was. But it was truly inspirational. Custody bank that looks at open banking, that's a completely different story. And that's what we will see more in the future. So in a way, beyond banking could definitely be that.
yeah, interesting. And does that then also change because you talk about collaboration as the one thing I probably want to talk about, and it's true. It's coming back quite often in the book as a strong topic that this is required. Discussions about RegTech becoming subtech and stuff like that. But how you as looking at from the bank side, you do talk to a lot of banks. How do you see, or has the relationship between bank and RegTech changed? And if it is changing, in which direction is it going?
There is more openness towards collaboration from a bank perspective. And I think a lot more maturity from the RegTech perspective, making the merge between both a lot easier.
Yeah.
So what you see now, in the past, there were fintech startups that needed support from banks to have a future, and they believed they could transform the bank, but they didn't understand the language of banks.
Yeah.
RegTech companies, of course, in a way, they have an advantage already because they talk about regulation. And regulation is one of the essential things that they need to understand in order to collaborate with a bank. What you see today is that the maturity went up,
Hmm.
meaning that RegTech companies have a better understanding of how banks speak, act, and live and think. And
Hmm.
banks understand that more than ever that they need external wisdom, external solutions, and external creativity to
Hmm.
ensure a future.
And I think the difference is also RegTech is solving problems that a bank has. So
True.
it's
Yep.
also more easy to articulate as a RegTech to what are you actually solving.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
and
And
yes,
then in the past there was that understanding as well, but then they lacked the way towards the solution.
mm-hmm.
Or I mean, not everyone, of course, but there
No,
were
no, no. But
more.
yeah, we
And
talk
today
in
you
general
see
terms.
that. Sorry.
We talk in general terms here. So
Yeah. But today you start to see that they also know how to find that solution and what are the constraints of building a collaboration, etc. And that's very, very important. So there's more openness from the banking industry to collaborate with external parties, both with RegTech companies, but also together in order to, for example, reduce costs of those elements in the banking industry that are no competitive advantage. Sometimes it could be more advantageous for banks to work together. That way, they have the required resources to build these unique selling propositions that are essential to convince customers to join their network and to buy their products.
yeah, which is often referred to as mutualization.
Yep.
But you cannot deny that mutualization is not a form of collaboration.
True.
So it's coming back to that idea of bringing mutual trust.
Yep.
I had an interesting discussion not so long ago with also somebody in the book that writes about blockchain and the challenges with blockchain and regulations. But we came also to the end towards a discussion about the philosophy behind blockchain, which is about distributed trust, is the fact that you need to trust more players in the chain in order to get a better result. And that's a bit in that same direction where you say banks that maybe were in competition before, but they can capture those elements for which they are
Mm.
totally not in competition for and
Mm.
mutualize that. So at the end of the day, they keep more time or budget to provide services to their clients, their
Mm.
customers.
Mm. Yep.
Hey, and as from what you hear from all the banks that talk to you, do you see the role of the bank changing towards regulations?
How do you mean?
Yeah, is has the bank also a sort of an obligation to? Well, I'm going to give you an example. I was speaking also to Close Match. It's a whole team that contributed to the book, and they in their chapter they end up by saying regulations should be adapted to robotization. So it should be more in a technical way. It should actually change to STP because if we want to really bring the whole industry to a next level, we want to have data which we can easily make interpretations on, and therefore we can also easier disseminate that to the right people. And this could be a role of a bank where a bank could say, hey, regulator, I want you to come. I don't mind about regulations. It takes, we need that. It's like you said in the beginning, but I want it in a different format. So is there a kind of pressuring from the bank possible, or are there any other ways of pressuring, or how do you see this dynamics between bank and regulations happening?
I think Oh, tough question. I think there's a lot of dialogue that needs to happen between both because regulators want to enforce new rules and the ones that need to obey to the rules also need to provide a buy-in to fulfill those rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. So I think it's a lot about dialogue. Not sure that answers the question, but to come back on the element of automation, I do agree that regulation deserves more automation, although I kind of disagree that it needs complete automation. Because, of course, automation works for rather standardized processes, but when it comes to interpretation, today
Mm-hmm.
automation is not at that level yet. And question is, will we ever get to that level?
Good questions. Yeah.
Because we're still talking about regulation in favor of customers, and are we going in the right direction if everything is taken over by robots? For standard processes, I'm definitely in favor of automation. But once you get to the exception handling, where you need to a proper explication of what's going on, you also need human understanding of what's going on behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was presently surprised by one of your after work sessions in which it was talking about RPA and robotization, that this also came out that you always need that human element in order to come to a complete picture.
Mm.
It will never be just solely robots. At least
Yeah.
that was the discussion, and I kind of like that thinking.
And it's evolving, of course. I mean, robots of 5 years ago are no longer robots of today, and they will not be robots of in 5 years.
You make me
But we're not.
scared when you say that. No, just kidding, just kidding. No, but you're right. You cannot compare technologies evolving extremely
Yep.
fast. Rick, maybe one more question as we are heading towards the end of this fireside chat or this interview. Why should people contact you?
Um, because I want to get involved in discussions on the future of our highly intriguing industry called banking.
The
Um,
banking scene.
the
Sorry.
banking scene, indeed. We have many conferences over the year, at least if COVID is not interrupting those. But anyway, rest assured, we are there every week with virtual roundtables on Thursday from 4 to 5, of which you're one of the recurring attendees, so you can
Absolutely.
testify whether they're good or not. But every time we do have very good guests to talk about anything related to financial services in the broad sense. Most of the time banking, but sometimes it can go beyond that. Think of Tim Drixes, for example, tomorrow on Venly. I'm also talking to a few insurance companies for 2022. Um, and yeah, many more to come, of course. So yeah, future looks bright and challenging, and there's a lot more dialogue to happen. And that's what I try to ignite with our activities of the banking scene, inspiring people, but also bringing people together and stimulate dialogue. Because it's not
Mhm.
you and I that will change the industry, but we can make an impact by stimulating interaction through, for example, books like the RegTechBlackbook that make people think, and hopefully these videos that also make people think on how they can create the fine art of banking.
Thank you so much, Rick. I couldn't have any better endings than this, as only me leaving with just a closing comment. So thank you again for your contribution to the book. Thank you for joining today. Thank you also to the listeners. Feel free to check out the channel. If you check in the RegTech channel, you'll see there's more of these interviews. So feel free to like them, to share them, to like this one, to share that one, to check out the banking scene. And yeah, apart from that, thank you very much and looking forward to see you all in real life.
All right, take care, Koen.
Thank you, Rick.
Bye bye.